Hey guys, and welcome on into the next NHL offseason preview show. And today we're going to be talking all about the Philadelphia Flyers, looking at their offseason ahead, taking a look at draft picks as well as free agents, taking a look at the projected lineup as it is now, and then we will both give our offseason tasks at the end of the show. And I said we because I'm not alone for this show. I have brought in Franco the Banker, who of course has been on some shows in the past. I believe you were on the Flyers preview show last year, and then I think you were on a betting show or two, if I can't remember. But Franco, for those who haven't seen you, maybe give a brief introduction of yourself, and then we will get on into the first segment of the show.
Yeah, I'm Franco the Banker. You can find me on Twitter mostly. Provide picks and all that fun stuff for NHL, other sports too. But yeah, I'm a Flyers fan ever since I was a little kid. And I live in the area, so hoping maybe we finally see a little bit of a turnaround starting at least soon with this team. We'll see when it happens, but hopefully we can get out of this dark time it feels like we're in right now.
For sure. And if you want to find Franco's Twitter link, it's in the description below. So make sure to go give him a follow. Start with the first segment, which is draft picks and management. And draft picks, as you can see, no fourth or seventh. People seem to trade. It's not just the Flyers. People seem to trade away their fourth and sevenths for some reason a lot. It's kind of weird, but and then they keep their fifth and sixth, but they trade away their fourth and seventh for some round. I understand trading away seventh round picks because they're not really worth that much, but the fourth is kind of weird. But anyways, the Flyers, one of those teams that has done that, but they've kept obviously the top picks. They've got their first, second, and third rounder, but they also have Colorado and Edmonton's first rounder, as well as Anaheim, Calgary, and Columbus's second round pick. So 7 picks in the first 2 drafts. The Flyers, if they go through with this, will have a lot of opportunity to draft some good players in the first 2 rounds. Maybe they look to the trade market and maybe wheel and deal a little bit. That's definitely an option for Daniel Briere, who's going to have a busy off season. Maybe not so much when it comes to RFAs, which we'll get to, restricted free agents, UFAs, but he's going to have a busy draft and a busy trade evaluation with different teams that are looking to make some moves. And then potentially some free agent hires. Rick Tocchet, the new head coach for the Flyers, I think a great hire for them. We'll see how year 1 goes, but I really think for year 2 and beyond, I really think once he gets settled in, I think it's going to be a better situation than they had previous, which I think everyone can agree on that. But Franco, draft picks, management, what do you think about all these draft picks the Flyers have, and what do you think about the management in place?
Yeah, I think they've done a great job in general acquiring picks. They also were able to trade away Lawton at the deadline and acquire a first rounder from the Leafs for next year as well. So they have a lot of capital. Now it's just whether you think there's enough depth in this draft to use all the picks or use them to move up. They finished as the 4th worst team in the league and unfortunately didn't do well in the lottery, moved back 2 picks to the 6. But again, like I've seen a lot of differing opinions as far as like, is this like a 6-player, bet tier in the top tier in this draft, or is it 4 players? Everybody seems to kind of have their own opinions, so it's really tough to tell like what's going to be there at 6, and do they move up with one of those late round picks from either Colorado or Edmonton? I think Colorado's at the 21st overall, but yeah, it's just interesting to see what they've done. They've loaded up on picks. Now it's kind of the time to, figure out how they want to make that into players that are going to be rosterable players. Because right now it feels like, we're going to get to the depth chart in a little bit, but there's players there that don't fill out the full lineup that this team should be icing. I have my questions about Tocchet. my initial response was kind of to the hiring was a little bit on the negative side, just because of what I saw this season from them. Obviously, he's a Jack Adams winner last year. And then this year, the team kind of fell apart in Vancouver. Injuries was a big part of that, obviously, but it felt like he kind of like lost the team in a way, like at some point with, the Pedersen and JT Miller saga. So I don't know. Is he the right guy for what is potentially going to be a really young team in 2, maybe 3 years from now? Maybe we'll see, I guess. I don't know. Hopefully it's the right hire. And, a lot of people are pointing to him being a well-known guy, well-respected coach in the league. And that is only going to help you in acquiring players, which obviously there's a lot of negativity towards torts in general. So I guess that when it comes down to it is a positive change for this team. And I hope he's the right hire for them.
And can he unleash Mishkov? Because I think we're going to see, and we kind of saw it after Tortorella got fired. We kind of saw, I guess, the leash come off Mishkov a little bit. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do next year. But we're not talking about next year yet. I will say with Rick Tocchet, I really don't think the whole Miller and Pedersen thing is really his fault. I don't know. I don't know if there's any head coach that would have been able to squash that, because it really seems like the two guys just don't like each other at all. And everyone has people they don't like in this world. And sometimes you can't, no matter what you do, you don't like that person, and there's just nothing you can do. And I think that might have been kind of the situation going on there. So I can get what you're saying, but I don't think there's really anything he could have done, in my opinion, at least, in that situation. But anything you want to say to that before we go on?
No, I think that's fair. I mean, who knows what's really going on behind the scenes there? So
that's true as well. We don't know. We really don't know. But the next segment is cap space and RFAs. Of course, the Philadelphia Flyers have full offer sheet capability. So going back to the last segment there, they have their draft picks for the next few years. So they can go and offer sheet a player a contract if they would like. And they don't have any UFAs to worry about. And they only have 3 RFAs. So like I said in the last segment there, Briere may not be overly busy. Now, he already did sign 1 RFA in Tyson Forster. So overall, he's got a few other guys here, Noah Cates, Jacob Peltier, and Cam York to kind of decide on what he's going to do with them. But lots of cap space. I don't really think any of these 3 players are going to command that high of a contract. Noah Cates is interesting. I'd be interested to see what he gets, but I don't think it's going to be overly a large amount for the 3 players. So they should definitely have cap space to go and acquire another player or 2 if they decide they want to go in, not go all in, but if they want to compete for a playoff spot this year. Franco, cap space, 3 RFAs. What do you think the Flyers should do with these 3 guys and during this offseason?
Yeah, so I think Cates is an obvious guy you want to bring back. He plays a pretty big role for them as far as what he does. He can really move up and down the lineup. He can play as high as like a second line center for them when they need to, but he's really more hovers in that third, fourth line role. Very sound defensively. I believe he's gotten a little bit better in the faceoff dot as well this year. And in reality, this team, you look at their prospects and what they have down the middle. He's 6'2", so he's one of the bigger players they have down the middle. I know there's a lot of, we'll talk about players they can potentially acquire shortly, but they drafted Luchenko last year, who's on the smaller side. They have a guy on the London Knights who just won the OHL championship last night in Denver Barkey, who's their captain. He's also on the smaller side. So when you have a guy that's 6'2", which isn't particularly big, but still bigger than, 5'8" guy, you're going to have to kind of keep him there and maintain him. So I think they'll bring him back. He had a serviceable year for them. I think like 37 points, so not bad. Peltier was thrown in that Frost trade. To me, like I didn't really see much of him, but at the same time, he came in towards the end of the season, so you don't really know what you have. I don't mind if they bring him back and just see what you have, like a 2-year deal or something like that. Cam York's interesting though. So the something happened behind the scenes with him and Tortorella, and the next game, I believe, or between those two games was when Torts got fired or quit, whatever you want to call it, and then York was actually benched that following game. He had to play or be on the bench the entire game because they didn't have enough call-ups left, so they couldn't call somebody up and bench him. He literally sat on the bench the entire game to serve out his punishment. So I don't know how good he's feeling about this organization. I don't know what happened behind the scenes there, but it seems like the writing's kind of on the wall with him as far as them keeping him or not. I think he's on his way out in some sort of way. I think he could be potentially another asset, along with those draft picks to acquire something. He is a former first-round pick. Hasn't really lived up to the billing yet, but he's still pretty young too. So maybe he's a piece. I don't think that they're going to bring him back, though. It just doesn't make sense to me, especially I would assume he probably wants a multi-year deal, and I just don't see him, with all the negativity around last year, wanting to stick around in Philly.
Interesting. Okay. Do you think they might go after another defenseman, or do you think maybe he would be used for a forward upgrade?
Yeah, I think you try to acquire a forward with a team that's deeper at forward and needs some, young. He's a former first, so I don't think teams are gonna. I think teams will value him to some extent and think maybe they can get more out of him than the Flyers have. So I think he still has value as much as, like, I personally, as somebody that's watched him play, like, don't feel like he has as much value, but
Yeah.
it's that name and that draft capital that still counts towards something.
And some guys just need a fresh start sometimes.
Yep.
Sometimes a fresh start will help a guy. And then he could be traded for another guy who's struggling somewhere else, and then he could do well in a fresh start. Sometimes it works out. Both teams win. So we'll see if that's the case here. Forward depth. So this is the projected lines for the Flyers heading into the offseason. I don't think this is the opening night lineup for the Flyers. I think there's definitely moves coming to be made. Mishkov, what the Flyers have here is a lot of right wingers. And some of these right wingers are actually having to play left winger in this top six situation. So maybe one of these right wingers are going to be available by trade. Tyson Forster obviously just got re-signed, so I don't see the Flyers dealing him. Mishkov, I think, is pretty much untouchable at this point. Travis Konechny is a little bit interesting, I think, because if the Flyers look at this team and think, okay, we're still a couple years away from being a playoff team, you could move Travis Konechny in a deal, and really with Cam York and with the draft picks you have, you really could go and get it pretty much anybody with some of the draft or some of the trade pieces the Flyers have. So Konechny, I think, could be interesting. Bobby Brink is, I think, interesting. Noah Cates, I don't think he's a second line center. I think he is like a perfect third line center, ideally. Owen Tippett on the third line is kind of interesting. Maybe he should move up to that second line. And then the fourth line, Delorier and Garnet Hathaway, not two guys you really want to play against. So potentially it is a good fourth line. So I don't hate the forward depth here, but I think the Flyers have way too many right wingers, and I think something has to happen. I don't know, unless some of these guys are okay with playing left wingers or playing left, but I think it would make sense to kind of retool a little bit when it comes to the wingers and go and get somebody to take that second line spot, especially because Sean Couturier is getting up there too. So if he starts to take a step back, then really the Flyers need that top line, second line center, I think, and then maybe an upgrade on the third line or something like that too. So those would be my thoughts. Franco, what do you think of this forward group heading into the offseason?
I think you mentioning Konechny as a trade piece is interesting. I wouldn't mind if they did it. I just don't think they will because they just re-signed him last offseason. So, I mean, are you really going to move on from a guy a year after signing like a big contract? I think it was
But maybe
almost
they just talk to him.
Yeah.
Maybe Briere says to him, "Hey, we're still a few years off, but this team is interested in you. Would you want to go there?" Or maybe like just kind of give him a
Yeah, give him an option, I
option.
guess.
Maybe,
Yeah. I mean, I would be down because I think he's probably honestly, besides Michkov, their most valuable player, as far in a trade at least. So yeah, and again, like I think one of the biggest issues with this team is their size right now. He's on the smaller side, so is Brink. Um, obviously Michkov's not that big either, so they really need to kind of get bigger. You're seeing it from Florida, obviously, with their size, and these teams that are deeper in the playoffs have size. They do have smaller skill players as well, but you need to kind of protect your guys too. Like you said, Couturier getting up there in age, so does he slow down? I think he kind of looked a little bit better, and then kind of after the Four Nations break for them, which is a big plus for them. He was coming off missing 2 years, so how long does it take for a guy that's kind of up there in age to really fully recover? So I tend to think maybe there's a little bit more positivity there as opposed to like a negative downturn on Couturier, but he is still getting up there in age, and eventually he's a guy that's going to have to kind of move down the lineup. So I do agree with Cates being really your third line, fourth line center. He should be hovering around there. He's the type of guy. Second line is like more of a pinch type of thing for him than sitting there. So obviously not ideal the way it's stacked up right now. And yeah, I think Tippett should probably be up the lineup as well. Looking at him on the third line seems kind of crazy. I know he had a down year, but we know there's some talent there as far as his goal scoring ability. Yeah, I think this team needs pieces. You look at it. Pelletier feels like more a fringe player. Delorier, same thing. It's like he's a guy that should be that extra forward that comes in here or there when you need a big body. I do think Hathaway fits the role perfectly. I think you slide Paling down to that fourth line center spot. Anthony Richard moves back to the AHL for this team. So you need a center. You probably need somebody to fill that left wing third line spot to move Pelletier down the lineup as well. So that's probably where you're looking at on this forward group. I do think that moving a right winger makes sense. I've float out the idea of Bobby Brink being that guy because he's on the smaller side, but I don't know how much value he has. If we're talking about a guy like Konechny, I feel like he's a guy that could have a ton of value as long as the team can fit him under their cap. So I'm really happy about the Forrester re-signing though. I think it's a great deal for them, a 2-year deal, not too much money either. He's betting on himself improving, and he looked great over the summer in the international tournament. So be interesting to see if he can kind of take a step forward too. That would be big for them.
Yeah, I totally agree with the Bobby Brink. It's not like he could very well turn out to be something, but I think his trade value might need a good year before his trade value really goes up. And then Konechny, why I think he would be a good trade piece too is because of the cap going up so much this year. And it's going up a whole bunch next year. So it's pretty much going up almost 10 million each year these next 3 years. So his contract will look a lot better to a team that is just like one forward away from competing. He could be that missing piece on a team. And then the Flyers, yes, okay, you're losing one of your most valuable players, but next year is a loaded draft. And do you really want to try to go for that playoff spot this year, or do you want to try to do it next year? That question will hugely depending on free agents. If the Flyers are going to want to do it this year, well, as me and Franco just discussed, they need to add guys. Looking at this, you were talking about the left wing position. What do you think here? JVR comes back to Philadelphia again. Do you think they should go after Ehlers? Brad Marchand in Philly would be really, really interesting. But what do you think here about the left wingers available, Franco?
Yeah, I mean, looking at these names, I'm not interested in most of them. Unfortunately, Kuzmenko's a right winger. He would be interesting to me. They acquired him in the Frost and Farabee deal that was shortly before the deadline, and then they flipped him again out to LA. So I wondered, because he was kind of having some chemistry there. It seemed like him and Michkov played together in Russia. So I wonder if you bring him back. But again, that's just another right winger added to your already deep right wing, side. I don't know if he can play the other side. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, I'm not very interested in guys like Ehlers. Like, I worry that he's going to demand too much, and he has a pretty extensive injury history. So I wouldn't want to get him. Everybody else is too far up there in age as far as what this team kind of needs to build around. I think they're finally kind of getting out of some of the cap hell that they were stuck in from the Hextall and Fletcher eras. Those names are finally going to come off. A few of them next year, actually, still there. But so I don't want to add a guy like Ehlers for 5 years who might be injured in 2, and then you have to eat the rest of that contract towards the end. Or one of these older guys. I mean, what, you're going to add Marchand to this roster, or JVR, who's been there twice now already? I don't think it helps this team, be anything more than a fringe wild card team that's going to get bounced in the first round, and that doesn't really do much for me personally.
Yeah, the only reason I could possibly see maybe Marchand or Ben being a good addition is just because the veteran presence might be good for some of the young guys to kind of get that veteran presence. But yeah, it's not worth it. It's not worth it enough to go and sign one of those guys because it just wouldn't make sense. But I think some veteran presence could be good for the Flyers, I think. So we both discussed centers as a need for the Philadelphia Flyers. Matt Duchene is going to get overpaid by somebody. Matt Duchene is going to get a huge contract. I'm sure of that. Tavares probably going back to Toronto from what I've heard. People mention Nelson in Minnesota. Please, no. Please, no Brock Nelson. No. No. Everyone and their mother wants Sam Bennett, who's probably sadly going to stay in Florida. I would love Minnesota to get him. I'm sure Franco, maybe 28, so maybe I shouldn't say I'm sure you would want Sam Bennett, but I think Sam Bennett, because the Flyers are still a couple years away, maybe wouldn't be the right addition. But again, some of these guys are much older. Claude Giroux, do you think he comes back to Philadelphia? No. What do you think about the guys in this list? Are there any of these guys that you think the Flyers should go and target this offseason?
I personally don't want Bennett at what the price he's going to be. I think that's the biggest negative for me. I see a lot of numbers being thrown around, speculation, obviously. Who knows what he's really going to get on the market, but people are thinking he's going to get up to $10 million a year. And, you sign a guy that's 28, he had 51 points, which I believe was a career high this year. I get the intangibles he brings. Like, obviously you're watching him right now in the playoffs, and he's a menace. He's a pain to play against. He brings that, which is something that can't be really quantified in stats like that we're seeing here. But again, you sign him to $9-10 million a year for what, 5-6 years or something. It's just, again, it doesn't fit. I think it would be an overpay if they did that. I think a lot of teams, it would be an overpay for them. If he's less, then maybe I could see it. But I don't see them being in really the running for him. I think Suter's interesting depending on what he goes for. Obviously, he played for Tocchet in Vancouver, had a pretty damn good season. If he's the right price, you get him like a 4 or 5 year deal at a decent number, I wouldn't mind that. But again, I feel like he would just be in. I feel like they have a ton of fringe 2Cs that would be a 3C on a lot of teams, and he's kind of that to me. So I don't know if I even really would want him. That would be the most intriguing name of this list, besides, the fun idea of having Claude Giroux come back just to retire as a Flyer, maybe play a year or two. But
yeah, if you were a team that was trying to compete this year, then you would probably be much more interested in a lot of these guys. And we'll get to the next page after this one where you might be more interested in some guys. But right wingers, we've got some guys available here. I'm going to assume that 40-year-old Corey Perry is not at the top of your list of players to sign. That just might be a guess by me. But what do you think about this list, Franco, or anyone here you would like the Flyers to go after?
this one's a little more intriguing because of, I think, like the talent level of these guys. I think they're a little bit closer to like a better age. At least I'm talking about Besser and Marner here. The other guys not so much. But Besser's intriguing because he, again, another former Tocchet guy. Like, who knows what the relationship was there, but talented goal scorer. Again, it just fills that right wing. Now, if you move on from a guy like Konechny, I wouldn't mind picking up a guy like Besser to fill that. If you're able to get a center for Konechny and a piece or a draft pick, whatever, I wouldn't mind bringing in a guy like Besser. This team needs goal scorers, really, like guys that can actually snipe. They don't really have that. Michkov has a lot of creativity and can put guys into position to tap in goals, but they don't have the talent to do so. So a guy like him is kind of interesting to me, depending on the price again and term, all that fun stuff. But that could be interesting. I think no matter what, I think any team in the league should be considering Marner. I know there's a lot of negativity about him. But this is a guy that put up 102 points. And yeah, that was his first 100-point season, but he has a ton of 98, 97, whatever it is, seasons where he just missed 100 points. So I don't think guys like that come available very often. Now, obviously, he's going to demand a ton, but he could be a guy that, you staple to Michkov for the next 7 years. And now you just need to find that center, and you have a pretty damn good top line of two really good playmaking wingers. So I don't know if he goes there, if he wants to be there. I don't know if he wants to be in the spotlight of Philly, which is not as bad as Toronto, but it can be crazy here. If you're not performing, you will get booed and all that fun stuff. So maybe he's not the right guy for Philly. But again, I think every team in the league should be at least considering and kicking the tires on Marner, just because a player of that talent and productivity level doesn't come available very often. And regardless of the playoff negativity, I think you'd be foolish to write him off completely because of that.
Yeah, I agree. And you just have to look here. 102 points for Marner. The next closest are a UFA points-wise is Patrick Kane, who had 59. So you're almost cutting Marner's production in half. And that's the next. So, yeah, he is definitely would be a great addition to any team. And, if the Flyers did things right, you could have Marner on one line and you could have Michkov on on the second line. And then your right side would be completely filled if you didn't put them together. But yeah, lots of teams will be after Marner. It's just, do you want to pay him how much he's going to want? Because I think when you take a look from Marner to Kane, how big of a drop off there is, teams that need a right winger are really, really going to offer Marner a lot. Now, that could benefit a team like the Flyers because Konechny, once Marner's gone, a guy like Konechny would look a lot better than some of the guys on this list. So, lots of potentials for Briere this offseason when it comes to UFAs. And as I said, the Flyers have full RFA offer sheet capability. So if there's a team struggling to sign a guy with their cap hit, or if they don't want to give a guy a certain number, But the Flyers look and say, hey, we want Mason McTavish, or we want Morgan Geekie, or Minnesota, we want Marco Rossi. There's lots of options here for the Flyers. Franco, I'll let you break this one down. RFAs, and this is just the top list. Obviously, there's more available, but this is the top RFAs available. Is there anyone on this list you think the Flyers should offer sheets or potentially acquire by trade this offseason?
Yeah, I think I would be a lot more interested in trying to acquire via trade, try and move that Avalanche pick or that Edmonton pick or both with a player like Brink or with a player like Cam York, like I mentioned previously, or Cates, like you said, to acquire. I mean, honestly, a bunch of these players would fit the bill to me. I think Paterka is interesting. I mean, the age range for all these guys fits in with what the team is right now too. Obviously, Rossi is one of the centers. I think Rossi and McTavish would be the top two for me as far as the centers go. And obviously, I said center was their biggest need. I guess the biggest question, and I think the reason why Minnesota is willing to move on from Rossi is the size and the amount of money he wants and the role he wants. So the question the Flyers need to ask themselves is another 5'8", 5'9" center really in their best interest? And my initial thought when he first became available was like, get it done, add talent no matter what, and at the center position you figure it out later. But the more I think about it, with Luchenko coming up and like I said, Barkey coming up as well, both of them being smaller size guys, and who knows what's going to happen at the 6th overall pick if the bigger centers all go. Are the Flyers forced again to take a smaller center there, or do they have to go wing at 6 overall this year? So do you just become redundant with 4 or 5 prospects in down the center that are all under 6 feet tall? You do need size in this league, especially at the center position. So I kind of worry, and I kind of wonder what Minnesota would want and what he's demanding as far as his contract goes. Is he looking for a Wyatt Johnston size deal? $8 million a year. I think that's a little much for a player of his caliber, at least to what he's shown so far. If that's the case, like I'd be a little bit more interested in McTavish. But yeah, I think any of these players, I pretty much that you're seeing here, maybe minus Geeky, just because he's 26, would at least have to be considered. And probably Velarde I'd be out on just because of his injury history. But anybody else I'd be interested in. Now, obviously, the price of the offer sheets is a big question mark here. How much are you going to offer and how much you're going to give up? And next year's draft class is going to be, more stacked than this year. So again, I think if you're able to acquire with the picks that you have this year, that would be my move, and see who's receptive and who's available, who these teams are going to move on from. And it's really a big question mark at this point. But I think my top two, like I said, would be Rossi and McTavish if they're acquirable.
Yeah, everything I'm hearing is that Rossi wants 7x7, which is what Matt Boldy got. The Wild offered him 5x5.
Okay.
And he wants 7x7. I do not want the Wild to trade Marco Rossi. Rossi had myocarditis during the COVID time. So basically a full year he was having to recover, which put him back a year. So he just had that great year last year. Yes, he's 23, but in development-wise, 22. I think he's going to take off this year. I think if the Wild keep him, I think he's going to take off points-wise. Yeah, he's not a big guy, but the Wild have Eriksson Ek. So I don't necessarily they have other big centers coming. So I do not want the Wild to trade Marco Rossi. If they do, somebody is going to get a good player, because I see him exploding next year offensively. Defensively it's always going to be an issue, but we'll have to see what happens with him. And then Bowen Byram is, everything I'm hearing, is one of the players in Buffalo that is unhappy and does not. Same with Paterka, I've heard things too. So Those two guys in Buffalo, maybe even Ryan McLeod as well. I'm not sure, but a lot of Buffalo players are unhappy. So maybe we see Philly and Buffalo do some kind of deal together. We'll have to.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that. I tossed out the idea of Byram for York. Maybe they got to throw a little bit more in there. But again, you're talking about two former first-round picks that kind of haven't lived up to the billing yet. So I wouldn't mind something like that. I do like Peterka as well. I think he had a hell of a season. So, yeah, I like any of those guys.
Perfect segue into our next segment, which is defensemen. This is the projected defense core for the Philadelphia Flyers. Nick Seeler, former Wild player. I always was very fond of him in Minnesota. Travis Sanheim on the top pair. Cam York, Jamie Drysdale on the second pair. Igor Zamula, Emil Andre on the third pair. And Helge Grands as kind of some depth. And my thoughts here, we still have a lot of young players on this defense. And if you lose a guy like Nick Seeler to injury, or if you lose, what happens if Sanheim and Nick Seeler are injured at the same time? Well, then you've got a really rough defense core here, and the goaltenders could get left out to dry. Drysdale, of course, an offensive guy, but still hasn't quite lived up to potential. And a lot of these young guys might not be experienced enough to handle the load if Sanheim and Seeler were to miss time. So the defense core, I think, needs work, but does have potential. So there's potential there. But I think if this Flyers team was going to try to compete for a playoff spot, which I don't necessarily think they should or they are, but if they wanted to, you need to fix this somehow. But Franco, defense core, what are your thoughts on it? Do you think they need to do anything with it now, or is it wait and see? What are your thoughts here on the defenseman?
Well, one player is missing from this is Rasmus Ristolainen. So I think that he missed like a large chunk of the end of the season. I think that's why he's not here. But that makes it look a little bit better. Not a ton better, but he actually kind of has revived his career in Philly. Played pretty well under Torts. So if you put him up with Sanheim now, that kind of pushes everybody else down. Then Zamula becomes or Andre becomes that extra defenseman. I'm really intrigued by Andre, honestly. For the limited time he was allowed to play for them last year, he showed a lot of flashes of just being a really good puck moving, playmaking defenseman. It's just, again, he's really blocked by guys like York and Drysdale. So again, that's why I think York is really a guy that's available in my mind. Ristolainen and Steeler fill that role of being the bigger shot blocking defensive defenseman. And then you have Drysdale, Andre, and York, and Sanheim kind of falls somewhere in the middle there. But I actually don't mind this blue line that much. Drysdale kind of showed some flashes last year towards the end of the season where it looks like he's kind of putting it together. But I don't know. It's when do you say, all right, like enough is enough? This guy maybe just doesn't have it. He's still very young, but you got to hope for this team's sake that he becomes that number one defenseman. And if that happens, like everything else kind of slides down and this looks a little bit better.
I think we see a lot of young players on this roster improve next year with Torts gone. And I think Drysdale might be one of those guys if he stays healthy, because he does have some injury history. But I think if Drysdale stays healthy, he could be potentially, in my opinion, could be one of the big surprises on the Flyers lineup this season. But of course, then it could go the other way as well. But I think with Torts gone, I think we're going to see some of these younger players take that next step next year for the Flyers. Defense core, UFA defenseman. While I said the Flyers do, in my opinion, need to upgrade the defense or add to the defense, I don't know if any of these guys are really the kind of guys you should be looking at. More, in my opinion, it would be like going after a guy like Bouchard from Edmonton and adding a guy like Bouchard to the defense. offensive dynamo type player who's young. But these guys are a little bit older. Franco, what do you think here? Do you want Brent Burns to come to Philadelphia? Is that what you've just been really hoping for? Is that 40-year-old Burns comes to Philadelphia, or no? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, this list, again, a lot of players don't fit in the age range for the time frame and all that fun stuff. And I think, like I said, you move on from a guy like York. I want to see more from Andre. I want to see if Zamula is good enough. So I don't know that I necessarily want to add another player that's going to block them. Honestly, one of the only players that pops for me here is Dante Fabro because he can block a ton of shots. He's more a defensive defenseman. But as long as Ristolainen's fine, I think they have enough of them to kind of skate by the season and put together at least a decent defense core that isn't going to be just completely Swiss cheese. But yeah, a lot of these names are guys that I probably wouldn't be adding even if I thought this was a team that was competing. Yeah, no.
Yeah, maybe not the most attractive UFA free agent year when it comes to defensemen. Now, Ekblad could do very well. Ekblad could really help out a lot of teams, adding a guy like Aaron Ekblad if he was to leave Philadelphia, or if he was to leave Florida. But if the Flyers' defense is good, well, somebody has to play behind them. And who is it going to be? That's my question. The Flyers, obviously, these three guys, Samuel Ersson did get the most starts of these three goalies last year, but the Flyers have three goalies, and I'm just not sure that any of them are a starting goaltender. Now, it's a lot. We haven't seen a lot of Kolosov or Fedotov, I think, really to be able to say that. And plus, a lot of goalies, it takes time. And sometimes goalies, even later on in their career, they start to find it. So I'm not saying give up all three, but I think there's lots of question marks here with all three of these guys. So if the goalies struggle, as all three did at times last year, the Flyers could be heading towards a nice draft pick next year. But otherwise, I don't know what to expect. Franco, goaltenders, do you like one of these three to be the starting goaltender of the future? Do you think they should kind of stand pat, and if you get a good draft pick, then great? Or do you want them to go and trade for a goaltender somewhere? What do you think?
So I've seen some rumors about them maybe acquiring Demko, another former Canuck. I don't have any interest in that personally because, again, like all that's going to do is make them that fringe wildcard team that's not going to be good enough, to really compete in the playoffs. This not tandem, threesome was historically bad. The Flyers actually, by a lot of advanced metrics, played pretty decently last year, and these guys were just next level bad that they lost more games than they should have because of how poor they were statistically and in the expected goal numbers and all that fun stuff. So I do think Ersson is at least a decent backup in this league. That can fill in if your starter gets injured. So I think he can stay and as far as for next season, like I think you just run him and Fedotov back. The rumor is that Kolosov wants to go back to Russia, Belarus. So most likely he's on his way out anyway. There's a lot of weird stuff in that saga anyway about him not wanting to play in the AHL and them having to, hold three goalies for a large chunk of the season, and eventually they did send him to the AHL and all that fun stuff. So I think he's on his way out, and that just kind of clears everything up for me. Like I think you just run it back with Ersson and Fedotov. I know, like I said, they were historically bad last season, but maybe without that third person there, making everything kind of uncomfortable and no one knowing when they're going to start or be benched and all that fun stuff. See what you have in Fedotov. I mean, he wasn't particularly great last year, but what does it matter for a team that's not going to make it into, they're not winning Stanley Cup next year. see what you have. You have him signed through the season. Maybe he finally gets it. I mean, sometimes it takes a while, like you said. A long time ago, the Flyers traded a guy named Sergei Bobrovsky because he performed poorly in the playoffs. So the rest is history there. But yeah, I think goalies are very funky year to year. Urson looked pretty damn good a year ago. So who's the guy? Who is the real guy in that year to year? Who knows? But I think they have a few prospects coming up. They're still a few years out that everybody's saying is going to be great. We'll see when that time comes. But yeah, I think this season it's pretty straightforward. You run back the two guys, let Kolosov go back to Russia, and see what you have going into next season.
All right, and something you did say too, historically bad probably means they can't get any worse, right? Like you're probably expecting a little bit of improvement at least, you would assume, but
yeah,
we'll have to see. Goaltenders available, UFAs, RFAs. Now, looking at this Philadelphia team, if I'm the Philadelphia Flyers and I'm looking at the goalies that are available here, I am 100% offer sheeting Lucas Dostal. Now, Anaheim is probably going to match it, but if I'm Philadelphia, Lucas Dostal, I'm really high on the kid. I'm really, really high on the kid. If he's not signed, he should 100% receive an offer sheet. That's my thought. So, Philadelphia, we just kind of talked about their goaltending issues. I think a guy like Dostal would be absolutely perfect. Jakub Dobish played very well for Montreal, and I'm really interested to see what he does. He could potentially be available as well because Montreal has other guy. I got Fowler's coming, so Montreal could potentially view him as expendable, and he's 23. I think the Flyers should really take a look at Dostal and Dobish. Devin Levi, I don't know now. Buffalo is looking to make moves, so maybe the Flyers did acquire Levi in a trade. I don't know how he's going to do in the future, but looking at this list, the top UFA goaltenders, if I'm Philadelphia, I'm not going anywhere near any of them because they're just none of them make sense whatsoever for this Flyers team. Unless you want to tank further. And if you want to tank, well, maybe sign Ville Husso to come help with that. But if I'm the Flyers, Lucas Dostal, you're getting an offer sheet. And then if the Ducks match it, then oh well, at least you tried. Franco, what do you think about the UFAs? I'm assuming you agree with me that you're not really interested in any of them. What do you think about the RFAs? What do you think about my thoughts on Dostal? What's your opinions here?
Could you potentially offer sheet Dostal and McTavish and put Anaheim in a bad spot? I think Anaheim has enough money to match both, but I don't know. Do you burn that bridge? This is a team that you've traded with in the past. Obviously, the Drysdale-Gauthier trade happened, a season ago. So do you burn that bridge by making an offer sheet? I do like Dostal. I think he's a really good young goaltender. So of this list, he would be the guy that, if you're talking about bringing somebody in and having that capability, I'd be very interested in that. Levi's a little intriguing. Otherwise, I'm not very interested in Tarasov or Soderblom. And Dobish, I don't know. It seemed like he kind of got exposed like later in the season. I don't know if he's good or not yet. It seems like a really small sample size, so I wouldn't really want to be offer sheeting him. And I think they already kind of have the pieces in place, like I said, in Urson and Fedotov, that there's no reason to even consider any of these UFAs. I think they already have guys of this caliber, essentially. Is Vladar maybe better than Urson? I don't know. Or Alex Lyon? I don't even know. Like these are this that mushy middle of goalies in the league that like continue to get contracts. They have starter stretches. They look good at stretches. They look absolutely horrible during stretches. Besides a few that are just downright bad. But I wouldn't have any interest in any of these guys. I think they have the goalies that they should probably run back unless you're going to make a move for one of these two young guys.
Yeah, it's really funny that you just said that because each show I'm doing and I'm talking about teams that need goaltending help, and I just look at the top two lists and I don't know how I can say David Riddick is going to help this team with their goaltending issues and they're going to be fine. Like there's nobody on those top two lists that you can say is going to help you. Like for sure. Now, one of them could. A guy like Vitek Vanacek could come out and have a great season. It's possible, but there's just no nothing is showing that any one of those guys in the top two lists could really help a team. So I agree with you there. Final segment before we finish off the show is Offseason Tasks. And my first one is re-sign Noah Cates. And if for some reason it's not going to work out, send him home to Minnesota. Trade him to Minnesota. I would like Noah Cates to be added. I think he would really help the Wild's penalty kill too. He'd be that good bottom six center that I think would help the Wild. Resign Jacob Peltier and Cam York were my thoughts, but maybe Franco disagrees with me a little bit. But for all teams, I'm thinking unless you're going to trade them, you want to re-sign your RFAs, get that dealt with. Add a top six center, preferably obviously a young one, because I don't think the Flyers are going to compete this year. And figure out the goalie situation. Franco is saying that maybe it's a little bit more figured out. Maybe Kolosov goes back to Russia and that kind of figures out the threesome type part. But luckily, the Flyers aren't trying to win the cup this year. So goalie situation, if you are looking at maybe one more rough year and a very loaded draft next year, maybe you'd want two goalies that were historically bad. Maybe that will help you get another good draft pick. And I know people are saying, no, there will be Flyers fans that will watch this and are saying enough is enough. We want this team to make the playoffs. Who cares about next year's draft? Trust me. You want the way the Flyers are set right now, the way the Eastern Conference is set up right now, the Flyers making the playoffs in the 8th spot, they're going to get destroyed by whoever they face. And if they are a bubble team, that's not going to help them out either. They're just going to get a worse draft pick next year. I think Flyers fans, take one more year. Take one more year of pain because it will really help out in the future. Franco, I'll bring up your offseason tasks and let everyone know what you think the Flyers should do this offseason.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to add that top six center, whether it's via the draft or via the RFA market or making a trade. They have plenty of capital and pieces that I think are expendable. It's just who's willing to play, who's willing to make those trades. I highlighted Rossi and McTavish as being two that I particularly liked. But maybe move up in the draft. Can they move up from 6 to 4 or to 3 with those picks? If teams are kind of willing to move down. I think really what it comes down to is this team's center depth just looks bad. And that's fine for a team that's not ready to make the playoffs, but you got to eventually start adding pieces there. And I just don't know that what they have currently in their in-house as far as prospects go is, maybe Luchenko is a 2C, but I just don't see him being a 1C given his size. So they really need that top, 1C that has some size that can, you're going to staple to Mishkov for his whole career, his Jonathan Toews to Kane. So, while Terry said that he wanted to re-sign York, I think if you can't find a partner or whatever the case is, I guess you do bring him back. But like I said, I think the bridges are burned there. I think he is going to be made available in some way, shape, or form. Maybe that's in that trade up or to acquire one of the centers, whatever it is. So I think you make him available. You figure out how you can get him out, and that will hopefully clear up some of the redundancy as far as the offensive defensemen go on this team and get Emil Andre some more playing time because he looks pretty damn good. I agree with Terry here. Resign Cates. Now, if Cates needs to be one of those players thrown in those deals to acquire, a guy like Rossi, I'm fine with it. 3 Cs are a lot easier to acquire than 1 and 2 Cs. So, but if all things are equal, I prefer to bring back Cates. I think he fits his role perfectly for this team, and you sign him to like a 5-year, 6-year deal and get him locked up long term. He fits the timeline and will be that just solid penalty killing third line center for you. And the main one here at the end, don't squander your draft picks. You have a ton of capital here. As a Flyers fan, we've had a lot of draft gaffes over the years, looking back, and you have the pieces to move up if you think that's what needs to be done, or move back even, I don't know, or use them to acquire somebody, but something's got to give here. This team needs to add more talent, more skill, more scoring ability, and it starts with drafting well and filling that prospect pool. I think they have some decent prospects, but they have had a ton of misses over the years. So this is really the first one that really feels like they need to get right. Mitchkov kind of fell in their lap a couple of years ago. There's obviously a lot of question marks about the Luchenko pick and trading back with Minnesota, Terry, and you guys acquiring William. And that's going to be a long you looked at thing in the years to come, whether that is the right decision or not. So again, they need to make the right choices here. It's tough, and I think this team just needs to run back that goaltending. As much as you look at it on the surface that is what this team needs as a goalie. I think you run it back, take one more year of pain, like Terry said, and hopefully another year from now, some of that contract money clears from some of the guys that we've gotten rid of over the years, and now you can really start adding some talent to this team, and younger guys start moving up. So I think they're still a year away from competing for a playoff spot, and I don't think they should be acquiring players to try to compete for a playoff spot this year. It just doesn't make sense.
I thank God every day for Steve Buell. He's that perfect guy on our defensive core that we've got our 3 young guys. So I'm really happy with him. And you were speaking about Philadelphia's drafting past. Trust me, we had Chuck Fletcher too. I remember. Now, I do have to give him credit. He did draft Kirill Kaprizov in the 5th round. So I have to thank him for that. But other than that, yeah, I know what you're talking about. By trade, by draft, I know. We had Fletcher too, but he's gone, and you don't have to worry about him anymore. And that's the Philadelphia Flyers offseason preview. This should be a big season for the Flyers, looking ahead to next year. And if it isn't, as I said, a loaded draft next year, but it's also projected to be a loaded free agency. Now, of course, guys will resign before then, but this might be one more year. That's what I think for the Flyers. I think you wait one more year, and the next year, that's when you really go for it. And maybe you trade some of your draft picks this year for picks next year. If for some reason there isn't a guy available, maybe you do a package deal where you get a pick from next year in a loaded draft. That could be an opportunity for as well. Maybe a team wants to late first, and you can get some kind of deal done there as well. So lots of opportunities for the Flyers. Franco, thanks for joining me. Everyone, give Franco a follow. His Twitter link is in the description below. Anything else you want to say before we finish off the show?
No, thanks for having me on. Can't wait for this team to finally turn the corner, but I think, like you said, they're still at least a year away from competing for real. So unfortunately, I'm more of that side of, just to get into the playoffs is not enough for me. I want a team that I know can compete, and I know a lot of people get impatient with it, and I'm sure fans of Buffalo would love to just make the playoffs, but is it that fun if you're just going to get bounced anyway? I'm more the side that it's not. So let's wait another year, get the pieces together, and then let's move forward, and hopefully this team becomes a competitive team again in this league.
Perfect. Awesome. Everyone, leave your comments on the video below what you think the Flyers should do this offseason. And we will see you guys on the next NHL offseason preview show.